68 years on this earth, and the only time I ever seriously considered becoming a violent man was in my own son's living room in Anchorage, Alaska, on a frozen November evening over a cup of coffee I never got to finish. My name is Ron Smith, retired carpenter, widower, third-generation Alaskan, born and raised in the Spenard neighborhood of Anchorage, back when Spenard was still the kind of place your mother told you not to walk through after dark. I've got hands like catcher mitts. A bad left me from a roofing job in '94. And according to my late wife, Gloria, a face that looks permanently disappointed even when you're happy. She wasn't wrong. It's just how the face landed. I built things for 40 years. Decks, cabinets, staircases, whole houses from the foundation up. I understand load-bearing walls. I understand which joints hold and which ones fail. I understand that you cannot rush good work, that patience is not weakness, and that the most important part of any structure is the part nobody ever sees. I did not understand until that November night that a man could look at his own newborn granddaughter and use the word damaged. But Henry did. And that was the night I walked out of his house. Drove back to my place on Raspberry Road, sat in my workshop until 3 a.m., building a small wooden rocking horse I had nobody to give to, and decided, quietly, without drama, the way I decide most things, that I was going to find that little girl if it took the rest of my life. It took 9 years, worth every single one. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it. Here, let me introduce you to everyone that is a core part of this story. Henry Smith, my son, 41 years old at the time of this story's end. Regional manager for a commercial real estate firm downtown on 5th Avenue. Handsome in that sharp, impatient way that makes people think he's competent before he opens his mouth. He got his ambition from me, and his coldness from somewhere I still haven't identified. His mother always said he came out of the womb already calculating. She said it fondly. I stopped saying it fondly somewhere around November of that year. Jennifer Smith, Henry's wife. Thin, careful, the kind of woman who apologizes before she asks you to pass the salt. She went along with the adoption the way she went along with most things. Henry decided silently, with her hands folded and her jaw tight. I blamed her equally for 9 years. Then I found out something that made the whole equation more complicated. More on that later. Cynthia, my granddaughter, born on a Thursday morning at Providence, Alaska Medical Center on DeBar Road. 3 weeks early, with her grandmother's eyes and her great-great-grandmother's stubborn chin, and a profound bilateral hearing loss that the doctors identified within 48 hours. She weighed 6 pounds, 2 ounces. I held her for exactly 1 hour before the world went sideways. She smelled like something brand new. She wrapped her whole fist around my index finger and held on. Henry called her damaged. I called her the best thing I'd ever touched. Benjamin, 14 years old when I met him. Deaf since birth, sharp as a freshly honed chisel, funnier than anyone his age had a right to be, and carrying a particular kind of anger that comes from growing up in a world that consistently underestimates you. He had no father in the picture. He started hanging around my volunteer sessions at the workshop, like a stray cat that pretends it doesn't need you while clearly needing you. He changed everything without ever meaning to. Gloria Smith, my wife, gone 6 years into the search, breast cancer. Quick and merciless, the way Alaska winters are quick and merciless. She made me promise 3 days before the end that I wouldn't stop looking. I told her I'd never considered stopping. She smiled and said, "I know. I just wanted to hear you say it." I've been talking to her ever since, mostly in the workshop, where the sawdust is so thick it feels like a presence. This is the phone call that started it all. Henry called me that afternoon and asked me to come over. He and Jennifer lived up in the hillside neighborhood on the east side of Anchorage, where the lots are bigger and the driveways have 2 cars, and people put decorative stone bears on their front porches. The kind of neighborhood that makes you feel like everything is orderly and correct and fine. Nothing about that night was fine. Jennifer opened the door, looking like she'd been crying for hours, and was pretending she hadn't. I noticed. I always notice things like that. I just didn't know yet what the crying was about. Henry was in the living room, standing. People stand when they're about to deliver news they've already decided you don't get a vote on. "Dad," he said, "we need to tell you something about the baby." The baby was 3 days old, still in the hospital. I'd been there every day, pressing my face to the nursery glass like an idiot in love, which I was. "What about her?" Henry looked at Jennifer. Jennifer looked at the floor. Henry looked back at me. "She's deaf, Dad. Profoundly deaf. Both ears. The doctors confirmed it this morning. And we've made a decision. We're giving her up for adoption. It's already in motion. There's nothing." I didn't hear the rest of the sentence. Not because I'm deaf, because something happened in my chest that was so loud it crowded everything else out. A kind of internal roaring, like standing next to a glacier kiving into the ocean. "What did you just say to me? Dad, listen. What did you just say?" He straightened up. Did that thing he's done since he was 16, where he squares his shoulders and his face goes flat, and he becomes very, very calm, in the way that means he's made up his mind, and your feelings are not part of the calculation. "We can't raise a damaged child, Dad. We're not equipped. We don't know sign language. We don't have the resources or it's not a judgment, it's a practical. She is 6 pounds and 2 and she has your grandmother's eyes, and you are standing in your living room calling her damaged. Dad." She wrapped her hand around my finger, Henry. Silence. Jennifer made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Henry's jaw tightened. "The adoption is already arranged," he said. "Closed adoption, private. It's done. There's nothing you can do." I looked at my son for a long moment, really looked at him. Tried to find the boy I taught to use a hand plane in that face somewhere. Couldn't find him. I set my coffee cup down on his nice hillside end table very carefully, so I wouldn't throw it through his nice hillside window. Put on my coat, walked to the door. "Dad, don't be dramatic." I closed the door behind me. Not a slam, just a close. Clean and final like a good joint. Drove home to Raspberry Road through the Anchorage dark, the November cold already turning the road slick, the mountains invisible behind the clouds. Went to the workshop, built a rocking horse, talked to Gloria, who had been dead for 0 years at this point, and was therefore able to talk back, and who said very quietly from the doorway, "Find her. Run." "I will," I said. I didn't know yet how long it would take. I didn't know yet what it would cost. I didn't know yet that the answer had been sitting 22 miles away in a kitchen drawer, in an envelope with my name on it, for 9 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. From year 1 through 3 after my granddaughter's birth, I got educated. The Anchorage Community and Technical College on Providence Drive offers a continuing education ASL course on Monday and Wednesday evenings, $32 a credit hour. The class is held in a fluorescent-lit room that smells like dry erase markers and industrial carpet. And the first night I walked in, I was surrounded by 19-year-olds who were taking it because they thought it would be interesting. I was taking it because somewhere out there, a little girl couldn't hear, and nobody in her biological family had bothered to learn how to talk to her. And I had decided that I was going to be the exception to that. The instructor, a deaf woman named Patricia, who communicated through an interpreter for the first 3 sessions until she decided we were ready for immersion, looked at me that first night with an expression I recognized. It's the expression people give old dogs they're not sure can learn new tricks. I learned every trick. I am a carpenter. I understand that your hands are your tools, that precision matters, that muscle memory is built through repetition, and there are no shortcuts. I practiced signs in my workshop while I worked. I practiced at the grocery store on Northern Lights Boulevard, moving my fingers against my thigh while I waited in line. I practiced in the truck on the way to job sites I was consulting on. I drove Patricia crazy with questions. She eventually stopped looking at me like an old dog and started looking at me like something that surprised her. By year 2, I was conversational. By year 3, I was dreaming in ASL. Gloria thought this was hilarious. "You couldn't learn Spanish for 20 years of me asking," she said once, laughing over her morning coffee. Healthy and alive and magnificent in year 2. 1 granddaughter, and suddenly you're a linguist. Reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "No," she said. "I suppose it didn't." I didn't know yet that I only had 4 more years of mornings like that one. The private investigators were a collective waste of $4,000 and my patience. The first one, a guy named Garrett who operated out of a strip mall office on Benson Boulevard between a nail salon and a tax preparer, took $1,800 in 3 months and came back with a manila folder containing information I could have found myself on Google. The second one came recommended by a friend and lasted 6 months before informing me in a very professional email that closed adoptions in Alaska were extraordinarily difficult to penetrate legally, and he didn't think he could help me further. I thanked him, filed everything he'd given me, kept going. I attended every deaf community event in South Central Alaska, the annual Deaf Awareness Festival at the Dina Civic and Convention Center downtown, school showcases at the Alaska School for the Deaf up on Braga Street, fundraisers, potlucks, theater performances, church services. I became a familiar face in spaces where I was obviously an outsider. A hearing 60-something former carpenter showing up with his halting but genuine ASL and his big carpenter's hands and his permanently disappointed face. People were kind. Nobody had seen a little girl who looked like Gloria. Gloria died in year 6, February. The mountains were buried in snow, and the light was thin and gray, and the hospital room smelled like antiseptic, and the flowers we brought 3 days earlier were already starting to turn. She held my hand and told me to find Cynthia. I told her I would. She told me not to be an idiot about my diet after she was gone. I told her I couldn't promise that. She smiled, closed her eyes. I drove home on the Glen Highway in the dark and the snow, and talked to her the whole way. Still do. Henry came to the funeral. Jennifer cried. We stood at the graveside at Angeles Memorial Park, on the hillside above the city. The whole skyline of Anchorage laid out below us like an apology. And Henry put his hand on my shoulder and said, "She was a great woman, Dad." I didn't tell him what I was doing. I hadn't told him for 6 years. He thought I'd accepted it. He thought old Ron had made his peace, moved on, found comfort in the grandkids he did have access to. Henry's younger 2, a boy and a girl, perfectly healthy, perfectly hearing, growing up in the hillside house without a sister they didn't know existed. Thinking about that still makes my jaw tight. I kept searching. I registered with every adoption reunion registry I could find. Alaska's voluntary registry, national databases, online communities. I posted carefully worded notices in deaf community newsletters. I attended an adoptee rights conference in Juneau and sat in the back and listened to people talk about sealed records and the fundamental cruelty of systems that treat human origin as classified information. Nothing for 9 years. Nothing. And then I started volunteering at the Save You School for the Deaf. Year 9, the year I met Benjamin. The Save You School sat on a quiet street in the Midtown area of Anchorage, a 10-minute drive from my house. They needed volunteers for their after-school enrichment program. Someone had mentioned they were trying to start a woodworking component and didn't have an instructor. I showed up on a Monday afternoon in March with my own set of hand tools and absolutely zero expectation that this would lead anywhere except somewhere useful to be. Benjamin was sitting in the back of the workshop space, feet up on a workbench that wasn't his, eating chips from a bag with the aggressive casualness of a teenager who wants you to know he's not interested. He was 14, dark-haired, wiry, wearing a hoodie that had seen better decades. He looked up when I walked in, clocked me in about 2 seconds, and signed with the particular eloquence of a kid who's been underestimated his whole life. "You the carpenter guy?" "Yeah," I signed back. "You the kid eating chips on my workbench?" He looked down at his feet, looked back up, a small smile, gone almost immediately because he had a reputation to maintain. "Your ASL is pretty good." He signed for an old guy. "Your manners are pretty bad," I signed back. "For any age," he laughed. Couldn't help it. Covered it with a cough that fooled nobody. We were going to be fine. Benjamin had the hands of someone who would be good at this kind of work. Patient hands, precise hands, hands that wanted something to do with themselves. His home situation was complicated in ways he mentioned sideways rather than directly, the way kids do when they're ashamed of circumstances that aren't their fault. His mother worked 2 jobs. His father was a concept rather than a person. He took the city bus to CE View every day from apartment complex over in Mountain View. He started staying late after the other kids left. We'd work and sign at the same time, which requires a specific kind of coordination that he found hilarious when I messed it up. He taught me slang, specifically the kind of signed slang that Patricia at the community college had absolutely not covered, and that I will not reproduce here, because some of it was genuinely inappropriate, and I was 50 years too old to be using it without looking like I'd had a stroke. I didn't tell him why I'd really started coming to Seaview. I didn't tell anyone. It was a long shot, so long it was practically horizontal. Then on a Thursday afternoon in October, 9 years and 11 months into my search, Benjamin showed me a photograph on his phone. He was scrolling through pictures from a weekend deaf youth group retreat out at Eckley Lake. Campfires, kayaks, a lot of kids making faces at cameras. He was showing me because he was in one of them mid-laugh, genuinely happy in a way he'd never admitted to in person. I was smiling at his picture when my eye moved to the background. A girl, slightly out of focus, standing at the edge of the group, with a mug in both hands, saying something to the person next to her. Mid-sentence, mid-laugh. She had Henry's jaw. She had glorious eyes. She had the stubborn chin of a woman 4 generations back in a photograph on my mantel. My hand went completely still. "Who?" I signed, and my hands weren't entirely steady. "Is that in the back?" Benjamin glanced at the photo. "Oh, that's Cynthia. She's in my Saturday group over at the community center on Fireweed Lane. Why?" I looked at the photo for another 3 seconds. "No reason," I signed. "Good picture." I excused myself, walked out to the parking lot, sat on the hood of my truck in the October cold, the Chugach Mountains going orange and gold behind the city, the air smelling like wood smoke and coming winter, and looked at the sky for a long time. Gloria, I said out loud to nobody, to everything. You are not going to believe this. I didn't cry. I'm not a crier. My eyes did something that was technically not crying. Let's move on. October into November of year 9. I didn't rush. Everything in my life I'd ever rushed, I'd regretted. Dovetail joints. Raising Henry. That second marriage conversation I'd almost had in 1987 with a woman from Fairbanks. Patience is the whole game. I asked Benjamin casually over the next week to tell me more about his Saturday group. Who ran it? Where exactly they met? What they did? Benjamin, who was not stupid, gave me a look that said he suspected something but didn't know what, and answered my questions because he trusted me. The group met at the Fireweed Community Center on Fireweed Lane. Saturday mornings, organized by a woman named Patty, who was a deaf education advocate, open to deaf youth in Anchorage, ages 10 to 17. About 15 kids regular attendees. I asked Benjamin if he'd be willing to introduce me sometime as his woodworking instructor. Casually, just as someone he knew. You want to meet somebody in the group? He signed. It wasn't a question. Maybe I signed. He studied me for a long moment with those sharp, dark eyes. Is it Cynthia? I didn't answer immediately. Ron, he signed. Is this about that picture? I took a breath, put down the hand plane I was holding, looked at this 14-year-old kid who'd come into my life like a puzzle piece I hadn't known was missing. I need you to trust me, I signed. And I need you to know that if you do this, and I explain everything after, you'll understand why. Can you do that? Long pause. Benjamin was quiet in the way that meant he was actually thinking, not performing. Yeah, he signed finally. Okay. He introduced us on a Saturday morning in late October. The community center smelled like old coffee and floor wax. The windows looked out onto Fireweed Lane, where the birch trees had gone bare, and the first real snow of the season was trying to make up its mind. I saw her across the room before Benjamin got to me. She was taller than I'd imagined, 13 years old, and already carrying herself like she owned whatever room she was in. That specific confidence that comes not from arrogance, but from having decided at some point that the world's opinion of your limitations was not her problem. She was signing rapidly to another girl, laughing, her hands moving with the practiced fluency of someone for whom this was a first language and not a courtesy. I thought, there you are, just like that. No fanfare, no roaring in my chest this time. Just a profound, settling quiet, like a foundation finding bedrock. Cynthia, Benjamin signed, tapping her shoulder. This is Ron. He's the carpenter I told you about. He's the one who taught me to make the bowl. She turned, looked at me with glorious eyes, extended her hand, not for a wave, for an actual handshake, like a person who means business. Benjamin says, you're the one who taught him to make the little wooden bowl. She signed after I'd shaken her hand. That was really good work. I laughed out loud, startled myself with it. Thank you, I signed. He did most of it himself. She raised an eyebrow, my eyebrow, the skeptical one, and glanced at Benjamin, who shrugged in a way that confirmed she already knew he took minimal credit for things. Your signing is good, she said. How long? 9 years, I signed. Something flickered in her expression, a small recalibration. 9 years is a long time to learn a language when nobody in your immediate life requires it. Why'd you start? She signed. I'll tell you sometime. I didn't know yet. I could not possibly have known yet that she already knew the answer. We met 4 more times over the next 3 weeks, always at the community center, always with Benjamin nearby, always easy and unforced. She told me about her school, Service High School, over on Dowling Road, about her friends, about the deaf theater group she performed with at a small venue on Fireweed that I'd somehow never attended, despite my years of showing up everywhere. She wanted to be an architect. She designed her bedroom 3 times in her head and could describe every structural decision in precise detail. Load-bearing walls, I signed when she described how she'd redesigned the layout to open the space. Her eyes lit up. Yes, exactly. You can't just take out a wall without understanding what it's holding up. I finished. She pointed at me like I'd said something correct on a quiz. I thought, Gloria, you would have loved her so much. On our 5th meeting, I asked her adoptive family, the Petersons, a good, warm Anchorage family who lived over in the Abbott Luke neighborhood, if I could speak with them before I spoke with Cynthia. They were cautious but open. We met for coffee at a place on Tudor Road on a Thursday morning while Cynthia was at school. I told them everything, all of it. 9 years, the ASL classes, the investigators, the deaf community events, Benjamin and the photograph at Clutner Lake. I put it all on the table. Her adoptive mother, Karen Peterson, listened to everything without interrupting, which is rarer than you'd think. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Mr. Smith, can I show you something? She opened her purse, took out an envelope, set it on the table between us. It was yellowed at the edges, addressed in handwriting I recognized to me. My old address, the house on Romick Hill I'd sold after Gloria got sick to move closer to Henry's family. My name in Jennifer's handwriting. My hands went still for the 2nd time in 9 years. This came about 6 months after the adoption, Karen said quietly. Forwarded through the agency. We assumed you'd been told how to contact us directly and chose not to. We kept it because I don't know why we kept it. It just didn't feel right to throw away. I turned the envelope over, still sealed, because it had never reached me. Because I'd moved. Because a $100 house sale had redirected the course of 9 years. I opened it. Inside was a photograph of me and Gloria at a family barbecue in the backyard on Raspberry Road. Summer, maybe 15 years ago. Gloria laughing at something off camera, me beside her, looking at her instead of the lens. And the note. Jennifer's careful, apologetic handwriting. Her grandfather loves her. His name is Ron Smith. If she ever wants to find her family, start with him. He won't have stopped looking. Jennifer had known it was wrong. From 6 months in, she'd known. And instead of fixing it, instead of walking into her husband's expensive hillside living room and telling him that she would not carry this particular guilt, she dropped one breadcrumb in the dark and trusted the universe to walk it home. The universe had taken 9 years to get around to it. I'm a patient man, but even I have a limit. That afternoon, I told Cynthia the truth. All of it. I'd asked Karen to be present. I'd prepared for a range of reactions. Anger, tears, disbelief, the door closing in my face. I'd prepared for everything. What I had not prepared for was her reaching into her jacket pocket and showing me a photograph. Me and Gloria. The same barbecue. The same summer afternoon. I know, she signed. I've known who you were since the 3rd time we met. I recognized you from the picture. I stared at her. Mom showed it to me years ago. Said, if I ever wanted to find my birth family, you were the place to start. That you wouldn't have stopped looking. She said it so simply, like it was obvious. Like, of course this is how it went. You let me figure it out on my own. I signed. I wanted to see what kind of person you were first, she signed. Before I decided, one corner of her mouth went up. You're okay, she signed. High praise. I'll take it. I want to be very clear. What I did next was not impulsive. Impulsive people flip tables and send angry texts. I am a carpenter. I measured twice, I cut once. I spent a year being Cynthia's grandfather in every way that counted before I touched a single thing related to Henry and Jennifer. Her school performances at Service High. Her deaf theater production at the Fireweed venue where she played a lead role and signed with such ferocious precision that grown adults in the audience cried, and she was completely unbothered by this. Fishing at a Cluton lake in June where she caught a larger salmon than I did and was insufferably pleased about it. Saturday mornings in my workshop on Raspberry Road, her across the bench from me, safety goggles on, fighting with joints, and winning. I photographed everything the way proud grandfathers do. Naturally, no agenda, just a man collecting evidence of being lucky. I also quietly called my attorney, a good man named David, who worked out of an office on L Street downtown. The kind of attorney who wears sensible shoes and doesn't overcharge you and tells you the truth, even when it's inconvenient. We had a long conversation. I made some changes. My house on Raspberry Road, the savings, the workshop, and every tool in it. The investments Gloria and I had made carefully over 40 years of two-income carpentry and teaching. All of it in the revised document went to Cynthia and to Benjamin, split equally with provisions for education and the purchase of professional tools, because I knew what good tools meant to a young person who worked with their hands. Henry's name was removed, without ceremony, annotation, or apology. David looked at me over his reading glasses when it was done. You sure about this? I said. He nodded. Sign the documents. Done. Then I called Henry and invited him and Jennifer to dinner. Special occasion, I said. Just the three of them, no kids. His voice on the phone was pleased in that particular way. That meant he'd already started mentally calculating. Henry always thought every gathering was an opportunity. This one was, just not the opportunity he was imagining. I cooked properly. Gloria's good dishes out of the cabinet. Candles on the table, like adults lived here. The house on Raspberry Road, cleaned and warm against the December cold. The workshop light glowing through the back window. The mountains invisible in the dark beyond the city. Henry arrived looking like a man who expected good news. Jennifer arrived looking like a woman who expected something else entirely. She'd been looking like that for 9 years. I realized the look of someone waiting for a bill to come due. We ate. Henry talked about a commercial development deal he was working on near Ship Creek. Jennifer asked polite questions about my knee. The fire crackled. The good dishes gleamed. Everything civilized. Everything surface. Dessert cleared. I said, I want to show you both something. I opened the laptop on the table, pressed play. 93 seconds of video. Cynthia's theater performance from October. The camera finding her on that small fireweed stage, signing a monologue with the kind of ferocious, specific grace that makes audiences forget to breathe. Her face at the end lit up, triumphant, completely and entirely alive. The room the way a room gets when something real enters it. Henry's face. I watched it happen. The color going, the jaw loosening, the eyes doing the math, her jaw, his mother's eyes, the stubborn chin from a photograph on my mantle, and arriving at an answer he wasn't ready for. Jennifer's hand went to her mouth. She made a sound that wasn't a word. I closed the laptop, refilled my coffee from the pot, sat back in my chair, let the silence do its work. Henry found his voice first. It came out wrong, small. Is that her name is Cynthia? I said she's 14 on a roll at Service High. She wants to be an architect. She understands load-bearing walls. She signs 3 languages, ASL, English, and she's been teaching herself French because she wanted to. She caught a bigger salmon than me at Ecleta in June, and she won't let me forget it. I paused. I've known her for a year. The silence after that was a different quality, denser, like something physical in the room. Then Henry exploded. Of course he did. It came out in a rush behind his back. Closed adoption, no right, legally actionable, how dare! All the vocabulary of a man who'd learned to dress his worst instincts in procedural clothing. I let him go. Sipped my coffee. Waited. When he stopped, I said very quietly, "You called her damaged, Henry." His mouth closed. Your mother's eyes, your grandmother's chin, 6 pounds 2 ounces, with her whole fist wrapped around my finger. And you called her damaged. I want you to sit with that word for the rest of your life. Every time you think about this night, I want you to hear yourself saying it. I turned to Jennifer. She was already crying, not the polite kind. The kind that's been backed up for 9 years behind a dam of complicity and quiet guilt. You knew, I said. 6 months in, you knew. You sent Karen Peterson a photograph of me and Gloria, and a note telling Cynthia to find me if she ever wanted her family. You did one decent thing, and then you went back to your life, and left the rest to chance. 9 years, Jennifer. 9 years of chance. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. I know. I said you were sorry. You've always been sorry. I just needed you to know that sorry, in this case, had a 9-year interest rate. Henry turned on her. Then I watched him process that his wife had known something he didn't, had done something without his knowledge, had carried a secret that complicated his carefully arranged narrative of righteous practicality. That conversation, the one between them on the drive home that night, was not mine to witness. But I thought about it. I thought about it with some satisfaction, I'll admit. I stood up, began clearing dishes. 2 things, I said back to them, stacking plates with the methodical calm of a man who's been planning this for months. 1, Cynthia knows who she is and where she comes from. She has chosen not to meet either of you. That is her choice, and it belongs entirely to her. You will not contact her, approach her, or attempt to insert yourselves into her life without her explicit invitation. If you do, her adoptive family has a very good attorney. And so, as it happens, do I. I turned around. 2, I've revised my will. David Hensley on L Street has the documents if you'd like to review them. There's nothing in there that'll surprise you after tonight. Henry's face went through several colors. You're cutting me out, he said. I'm redirecting, I said. Cynthia needs an education fund. Benjamin needs tools. Who the hell is Benjamin? A 14-year-old kid who did more for this family than you have in 9 years. I said without meaning to, without knowing. Just by being a decent kid who showed an old man a photograph. I hung up the dish towel. Neat square. You can see yourselves out. The roads are icy. Drive careful. I walked into the workshop, closed the door behind me, stood in the sawdust smell and the warm yellow light, and listened to the murmur of voices through the wall. Then footsteps. Then the front door. Then Henry's car in the driveway. Then nothing. Then the mountains out there in the dark, and the stars coming through the workshop skylight, and the smell of good wood and varnish and 40 years of work. Gloria, I said. Nothing. Everything. I picked up a piece of walnut I'd been holding on to for 6 months. Beautiful piece. Tight grain, rich color. The kind of wood that rewards patience. Cynthia had mentioned once, sideways. The way she mentions things she actually cares about. That she'd always wanted a proper drafting table. The kind with a solid surface and adjustable height. And drawers on the side for plans and instruments. I found my pencil. Started sketching measurements on a scrap piece of pine. I had work to do. Henry drove home in silence. Jennifer stared at the passenger window. For 22 miles, the hillside house was lit up when they got there. Warm, expensive, full of children who had no idea their sister existed. Henry stood in the kitchen for a long time after Jennifer went upstairs. Stood there in his good coat, not taking it off, just standing. I know this because Henry's younger daughter, Mara, 12 years old and already more perceptive than her father, told me on a phone call 3 weeks later that her dad had been weird and quiet, and she was worried about him. I told her he was going through something and he'd be okay, which was at least half true. In the months that followed, Henry started noticing things he'd never noticed before. A deaf woman signing to her daughter in the checkout line at cars on Northern Lights. A group of deaf teenagers laughing on the transit bus on Fifth Avenue. Their hands full of language and color and speed. A man at the airport signing to a phone interpreter, completely self-contained, completely fluent, completely fine. He called me in February. I let it go to voicemail. He called again in March. I listened to the message, long, uncomfortable, the voice of a man who'd been rehearsing and still couldn't find the right words. And then I didn't call back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That clock runs on Cynthia's time, not mine. Jennifer wrote Cynthia a letter through Karen Peterson. Didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't ask for a relationship. Just put it on paper. The guilt, the cowardice, the one letter she'd sent into the dark, and what she'd hoped it might do. She wrote, "You were never the problem. I want you to know that, if nothing else." Showed it to me in the workshop on a Saturday morning. Safety goggles pushed up on her forehead, wood shavings in her hair. She read it twice, handed it back. "I already knew," she signed. "I've known since I was old enough to understand the whole thing. None of it was my fault, and I was never damaged." She said it the way someone states a fact about load-bearing walls. Simple, settled, beyond argument. "No," I signed. "You weren't." She nodded, put her goggles back down, went back to the joint she was working on. She sent Jennifer 2 sentences back through Karen. "I know it wasn't my fault. I knew that before your letter." She didn't write again. She didn't need to. Some doors you leave closed, not from anger, but from simple sufficiency. Because you have enough. Because you've built something solid from better materials. Because the person on the other side of the door made their choice a long time ago, and you've long since built your house without them. Benjamin turned 15 in April. I gave him his own set of chisels, good ones, Swiss-made, the kind that hold an edge. He held the case for a long time without opening it. "These are too good for me," he signed. "They're exactly right for you," I signed back. "Don't abuse them." He looked up, did the thing he does where the cool evaporates for just a second. "Ron," he signed. "Yeah. Thanks for staying late all those Mondays." "You stayed too," I signed. He shrugged, opened the chisel case, and got to work. May and Anchorage is the city's best-kept secret. The birch trees come back all at once, like they've been waiting to make an entrance. The Chugach goes green above the snow line, and the light lasts until almost midnight in that long golden way that makes you understand why people stay here, despite the winters, and the dark, and the cold that gets into your bones in November and doesn't fully leave until now. Saturday morning. My workshop on Raspberry Road. The drafting table is finished. Walnut solid as a foundation. Adjustable height. 3 drawers with hand-cut dovetail joints on each. 1. It's the best piece I've made in 20 years. Possibly ever. Cynthia stands across the workbench from me, safety goggles on, working on a small cabinet she's been designing for 3 weeks. Her own design. Clean lines, smart joinery, nothing wasted. She makes a decision about a corner joint, executes it, holds it up. Perfect fit. The 2 pieces come together without a gap. She looks at me over her goggles. Perfect, she signs. I take it from her, turn it in my hands. The joint is tight and true and exactly right. The grain matches. She's thought about this. I hand it back. Nod once. The way you nod when something is actually, genuinely, not just fine, but good. You get that from me, I sign. She rolls her eyes with the affectionate exasperation of someone who's heard this before. Goes back to work. In the corner of the workshop, barely visible under a drop cloth, is the wooden rocking horse I built the night I drove home from Providence, Alaska Medical Center 14 years ago. With nothing but a set of carpenter's hands and a decision, dusty, patient, still waiting, Cynthia spotted it 3 weeks ago and asked about it. I told her the story. The November night, the coffee cup I sat down carefully so I wouldn't throw it. The 3 a.m. building session. The varnish at dawn. She was quiet for a moment. You made it that night? Who'd you make it for? I looked at her. She looked at me. Oh, she signed. She looked at the rocking horse for a long time. Then she signed. I want to refinish it. Give it to my little cousin. I told her that was a fine idea. Gloria would have said the same. Henry never got another dinner invitation. He kept expecting one, kept leaving voicemails in that careful, rehearsed voice. I listened to all of them. They got shorter as the year went on. The last one in October was just, Dad, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. 14 seconds. 9 years too late. But there it was. I haven't called back. Cynthia hasn't invited contact. Maybe someday she will. Maybe someday she won't. That math is hers, and I won't rush it. What I know is this. On a Saturday morning in May, in Anchorage, Alaska, with the birch trees out and the Chugach green, and the light coming gold through the workshop skylight, my granddaughter is across the workbench from me, making something beautiful with her hands. She is 14 years old on a roll. 3 languages. Future architect. She understands load-bearing walls, and she has glorious eyes, and she can outfish me at a clued, and she signs, you get that from me, back at me sometimes, now when I do something right, just to watch me react. She is the least damaged person I've ever met. She is extraordinary. She is exactly who I knew she was the night I held her for 1 hour in Anchorage, and she wrapped her whole fist around my finger and held on. Some things are worth 9 years. Some things are worth more. Ron Smith lives on Raspberry Road in Anchorage, Alaska. His workshop light is on most mornings by 6. He is not hard to find. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being part of this sphere.